What happens when the culture really is imposing on us ways of being that cut us off from beingness? And we know how the culture does that with its fast pace and its consumerism and its addiction and its demand to succeed in certain ways. It's hard. So that brings us to Thoreau. Now, Thoreau, in his time, a neighbor put it that he was described this way: an irresponsible idler, a trial to his family and no credit to his town. Okay, so he was seen as a loser. And he was disregarded largely as a writer. In fact, Walden languished on bookshelves for years. So at age 26, he went to New York City because he really wanted to establish himself in the literary scene there. And he tried to develop his career in a conventional way, and he kind of shaped his prose to match the fashion of the times and so on. Some of you might know the story. Well, he was a total failure. I mean, he just crashed. He was really not paid attention to, really rejected. So that, of course, when we hit bottom, we do the soul searching. And for him, in that soul searching, he realized he had tried to fit into convention and lost touch with beingness. What did he do? He returned to bring his attention back to the natural world. He went back home. He set up shop, so to speak, 1.5 miles from his house. That's where he did all his natural observing and being. And through that time, his mother brought him sandwiches and cookies. I mean, he was like, this was not some grandiose thing. People still thought of him as this guy that was just hanging out. Okay? But what was happening within him had some majesty to it, was holy. Because his love for this natural world and his observation of the nature around him and within him opened him. He got aligned, and he became empowered. His writing became empowered because he was tapped into the source, tapped into beingness. So he could inspire people, continue to inspire people to be who they really are. This was his message. He says, one should always be on the train of one's own deepest nature, for it is the fearless living out of your own essential nature that connects you to the divine. He sensed what he loved. He sensed the possibility of really manifesting it, and he engaged. So it's instructive to us, because it is so clear that in this culture, in the West, we are painfully disconnected from the natural world, so much so that it is that we can even allow it to be violated, this larger body of our being. And we're disconnected from our own beingness and our busyness, our activity. So his message is, know what you love. Aspiration. Come back and connect to beingness. And then find that you become like that straw, that the universe will start flowing through you in a very organic and powerful way. I was reading about Thoreau, and I thought of Joni Mitchell's words, we're stardust, we're golden, and we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. You know, I've heard it for so many years, but just hearing it again, you know, we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. That's where hope arises and carries us into the fullness of what we are. This is Mary Oliver. She says, what can I say that I have not said before? So I'll say it again. The leaf has a song in it. Stone is the face of patience. Inside the river there is an unfinishable story, and you are somewhere in it, and it will never end until all ends. Take your busy heart to the art museum and the Chamber of Commerce, but take it also to the forest. The song you heard singing in the leaf when you were a child is singing still. I am of years lived so far 74, and the leaf is singing still. So again, I'm going to keep naming the components. It's this longing to live fully, and then finding a way back into the garden. For us here, so many times it has to do with stepping out of the thoughts that keep us limited. Coming back to the body and allowing what's here. Being in our larger body of nature and remembering the natural rhythms. Knowing our belonging, and that aligns us so our actions then come out of wisdom and serve healing. Okay, our next person. Bill Wilson, which many of you know of as the force behind the 12-step programs, Alcoholics Anonymous. So when he hit bottom, he went to a detox center, was given a whole mess of belladonna, and then he said, if there's a God, may he show himself. And he said, I'm willing to do anything. Okay, so there he was, hit bottom, recognized, can't do it. Asked for help. If there's a God, may he show himself. And the place was suffused with white light. Okay, the white light experience. And never had a drink again. So he contacted beingness and then continued to contact it through prayer and meditation, his sense of God. And that allowed him to align and be a channel for creating an organization that's one of the most massive, pure communities in the world that's hope-giving, help millions. So when we look at, what makes the 12-step programs work for people? We end up finding the same basic components we've been exploring tonight. That they wake up hope that we can be abstinent and live free from addiction. And it happens in different people in different ways. I was talking to one friend just right before class, and he told me his story. So I'll share it with you. So he hit bottom on alcohol and complete misery, and as the first steps goes, he was able to admit, I'm hopeless, I'm helpless, I'm defeated. Okay, so there's a recognition of hopelessness, which is really important. If we want to have the aspiration to unfold, we have to acknowledge the truth of where we are. So he admitted it, and he said even after he admitted it, just going on his way to his first meeting, hope started flickering up because he could sense himself on his way to something that involved people getting better, that there was some possibility. But he described, things unfold at their own pace. He heard all the stories about Bill Wilson and this flashing bright light, and there he was just kind of schlepping along. But he described to me how not that long after, he was bicycling, he was in New York, and he was bicycling towards Grand Central Station, and he had the thought, wow, I'm safe. I don't have to lie anymore. I don't have to pretend anymore. It's really okay to be who I am. Like there was this deep sense of safety. And when he had that thought, his entire body energetically was charged up. He felt zapped. And then he went, so that's my white light. This feeling of whoosh, this aliveness, this energy. Again, that channeling of energy that's enabled him now to help so many people, and many, many young people, in trusting who they are and trusting their capacity to be strong, be confident, be bright lights themselves. So that's what our hope does, is it becomes contagious. When your hope comes from a really deep place, from a wisdom place that knows possibility, knows it's possible to wake up, when you sense, wow, this heart's waking up, there's more loving going on, this consciousness is waking up. When you sense that possibility, you know that it's not such an individual thing. It's the universe waking up through you, and it's waking up everywhere, and you can be a transmitter of that hope. You can remind people of what's possible. It happens a lot in groups. In fact, you want to say a descriptor of hopelessness when we're isolated and when our storyline is nothing can work out for me, so a sense of isolation, fear, hopelessness, the basic thing we need to do is to plug into something larger. We need to be in an environment that's larger that can remind us. So, every spiritual community, Buddhism has spiritual friends groups. We have they're called Kalyanamitta groups. We've got about 30 some of them. Not just if you're bottoming out, if you just want to keep on waking up. We remind each other. There's a transmission in being with each other and being with a group. People come to a retreat to meditate, and they discover there's an energy in the room that's holding that possibility for all of us. It's a collective energy that just has this wise knowing that waking up is possible, and it's contagious. You see it not just in Buddhism and in spiritual friends groups, but I'm reading a book that came out of Rick Warren's church about the purpose-driven groups, the small groups in these mega churches. Exactly the same thing. It's with community, with each other. And in that field of connecting and belonging with each other, that we get that hope. So in AA, one of the basic ways it happens, sponsors and the group meetings, and there's also an internalizing and sensing, oh, that possibility, that guidance can come from within, and we sense there's a sense of a higher power. Now, there are many words for higher power. For some, it's, what my friend described, that kind of aliveness of presence that came through him. For some people, it's described as, the creative force in nature, and for others, it's Buddha nature, and for others, it's formless, light-filled presence. It doesn't matter. All that the it is what's beyond this ego self. It's that source that Rumi talks about of awareness and love that's beyond our personality, that we begin to trust and sense can guide us. Which brings me to I think it's my last story. It's going to have to be my last story. There are endless stories. In fact, every one of us has a hope story to tell of when we had doubts. Because, the Buddha described that doubt is the most challenging of the hindrances. And that's where the freedom comes, when we face it and then sense who we are beyond the deficient self. So we have Mahatma Gandhi. And his gift to the last century and this century was hopefulness. Some trust that it's social transformation, unfolding as a globe, as a society of humans is possible, not from violence, but from love and dedication. Non-violent transformation. And the purity of his hope and faith mobilized millions of people. Millions of people sensed, oh, there's some spiritual unfolding consciousness that I'm part of, and we can act from to bring more justice and healing into this world, more freedom. That's amazing. So he was a hope monger. I mean, he's a great example. So what was the source of his hope? How come it was so powerful? What made him such a bright light? Okay, so that's a really interesting question. So as a young man, again, I know a lot of you know this story. He was shy, he was tongue-tied, he was plagued by fears and doubts. He was really mediocre in high school. He dropped out of college. He did terribly in law school. He went to England and did a bad job. He was famous in the Indian legal world he was asked to present a difficult argument in one case, and he freaked out and ran out of the courtroom. And so, these are stories about him. So, as a child, he was obsessive, he was fearful. There's a story he told often of a family servant who he'd run into her arms after he was bullied at school. And she was kindly, but also sensed something's got to change. So she said, whenever you're threatened, instead of running away, just chant the mantra Rama, 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 which is the divine, God. And she said, this will turn fear into courage. So she's giving him his pathway back to beingness, right? So he practiced it some, but not intensively. And in fact, when he left India to go to South Africa, he left in a way to, save his career, because his career was floundering. So the point is, in growing up, he was not a forceful, powerful man. But then he turned to this practice when he was in South Africa, and something shifted. Because when he returned, he became the Mahatma, right? The Mahatma means great soul. And what shifted was he really gave himself, when he was challenged, to what I sometimes think of as calling on some higher belonging, some greater belonging, to kind of reach beyond his ego self and call Rama, 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 the sense of the divine or the sacred. That's mantra. For some people, it's the sound of an iPhone that brings them back home. It's true, sometimes that does it. So for some people it's a mantra, for others it's the breath that brings them back home into beingness. For others there's some image that's quite beautiful for them that brings them, so that there's this quieting and collecting of the mind. We all need it. William James had to do it. Every one of us has a mind that has a lot of thoughts that are not useful. So we quiet and we collect, whether it's with Rama, 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 or whether it's feeling the breath, or whether it's feeling the sensations of the body or listening to sounds. We begin to collect and quiet our attention. And in that quietness, as we deepen our attention, we begin to sense what's revealed is this presence that we're calling sacred presence. And it's our own presence. It's not like the light that Bill Wilson saw was outside him and he was removed from it, or it wouldn't have inspired him. It's not like Rama, Rama, Rama's outside. It's this sense that awakens that there is some sacredness, some presence, something we can trust that's right here, that source that Rumi talked about, that beingness, that endless ocean. And that's what gives hope. Then we sense there's this infinite potential, and then as life plays itself, we're available to it. And so it was with Gandhi that he became available, and he tapped into that wisdom that knew that to change things on planet Earth, you cannot meet hatred with hatred. By love alone can we heal. He knew that. And he helped wake up that understanding in others. And he became an instrument of what he called soul force, as did Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela. You can feel it. These are all beings that, since Nelson Mandela and all those years in jail, and yet what was it that kept him going? He sensed possibility. He had hope. He said, in my country we go to prison first and then become president. It was a great line. But I want to invoke him because here he is at the end of his life, and oh my gosh, just to sense his presence, if we sense that and let that commingle with us in the field, we're sensing a transmission of trust. He had a basic trust in goodness, trust, and aspiration, cared about this life, and that hope in what was possible. Incredible force, soul power, soul force. So, as a way of ending, just to say it really is one of the essences or grounds of all spiritual paths is this sense of tapping into our beingness and sensing incredible possibility. And it's not a possibility that's out there at another time. What we're hoping for and what's possible is already seated right here in the source, in who we are. So I'd like to end together with another meditation that's very much like our opening reflection. And as a way of arriving, I'd like to invite you to breathe in fully. And with the out-breath, just let go of whatever you might be holding, leftover tension in the body that's just habitual. Just let go. And again, breathing in deeply, filling up. And with the out-breath, slow, just letting go, letting go. Breathing in deeply. And sensing again this letting go with the out-breath, letting go of thoughts, letting go of beliefs, sensing the possibility of putting aside the skepticism or conditioning, anything that closes us off, so that the breath can resume in its natural rhythm now. And you can feel the breath and also sense this whole field of aliveness that you belong to. This is one of the ground of belonging to this living, vibrating, this web of life. Just opening to that. Sensing the sounds. Sensing in the background that which is aware. This consciousness that's here. Your own beingness. Shantideva writes in The Miracle of Awakening, as a blind man feels when he finds a pearl in a dustbin, so am I amazed by the miracle of awakening rising in my consciousness. So I am amazed by the miracle of awakening rising in my consciousness. It is the nectar of immortality that delivers us from death, the treasure that lifts us above poverty into the wealth of giving to life. So I am amazed by the miracle of awakening rising in my consciousness. Sensing this miracle of awakening, this tenderness of heart, this unfolding or evolving, the way the universe is unfolding in consciousness through you. And again to ask, what would it mean to feel the open-heartedness of hope? To sense the potential of this being, to love without holding back. To sense the potential of this being, to open to that universal flow of creativity and wisdom. And again, you might bring to mind hopeful beings, those you know, Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, anyone that represents that wisdom that trusts what's possible. Just let that commingle in your field. What's it like for your body to open to that attitude of hopefulness? That you're part of this unfolding of universal consciousness. That all shall be well. What is your heart like when you're open to this attitude of hopefulness? Your mind. Can you imagine how you'd enter the day tomorrow? How you'd engage with people? go about work with this attitude of hopefulness, possibility, of really manifesting who you are. Close with Rumi again. Everything you see has its roots in the unseen world. The forms may change, yet the essence remains the same. Every wondrous sight will vanish, every sweet word will fade, but do not be disheartened. The source they come from is eternal, growing, branching out, giving new life and new joy. Why do you weep? That source is within you, and this whole world is springing up from it. The source is full, its waters are ever flowing. Do not grieve. Drink your fill. Don't think it will ever run dry. This is the endless ocean. Namaste.